Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, welcome back once again to Professor Game Podcast, and we're with Cedric today. But Cedric, before we get started, are you prepared to engage?
I am.
Let's do this. And Cedric, how should I pronounce that?
That's Cedric.
Cedric. Okay, so Cédric Pontet, and I hope I got that decently.
Yeah.
My pronunciation is not
if you want the French accent, it's Cédric Pontet.
Cédric Pontet. I'll try to do that as many times as I can today.
But no worries, I've been traveling a lot, so I have had many different versions of my name. So I'm used to it.
That is fantastic, Cedric, because he is the CTO at Agile Partner, and he's also the founder of Play 14. He's an EventStormer, a Sketchnoter, a happy Salmon guru. We might get a little bit into understanding what that's all about, a Gnome drawing expert, and much more. He is very seasoned as a software expert, an Agile and Lean coach. And he started his career in software engineering in 2001 and has been happily employed since 2005 with Agile Partner. Of course, there he has worked on a large variety of projects for customers in both public and private sectors. As I said, he is the CTO of this company. And of course, on a daily basis, he is helping teams on matters like software architecture, cloud computing, agile, lean, and DevOps. I've heard this before, not only because I'm a software engineer, even though I'm not doing any of that nowadays, but because our development team is using these DevOps. So that's something interesting from our team at IE. He defines himself as well as a curious and pragmatic, and is proud to be part of different communities. Things like agile, domain-driven design, EventStorming, Sketchnoting, and he enjoys mixing these influences to bring people together. And one of the reasons why Cedric was brought to our attention as well is because he's one of the founders of Play 14, that's play14.org, a worldwide community of like-minded people who strongly believe that playing is the best way to learn, share ideas, and trigger creativity. And he is also, of course, an international speaker of various software and agile conferences like Build Stuff, Voxxed Days, KanDDDinsky, Agile Grenoble of FlowCon. Cedric, is there anything that you would like to highlight that we perhaps didn't mention, or you want to make sure that our audience gets right?
I think you said it all. I pretty much dabble in different things, like my daily job and my, let's say, my passion for games on the side. I use them both, so it's pretty good for me.
Sounds pretty exciting as well. And we would like to know, Cedric, in a day like today or yesterday, whatever you want to go for, what does it look like to be Cedric in a day, for a whole day, for a whole week, whatever you want to go for?
Well, as I said, I wear many hats. I'm the CTO of Agile Partner. I'm also an Agile coach at Agile Partner, and as such, I do different things. I have also my occupation with Play 14, so it's quite different. So as a CTO, I take part of some meetings for Agile Partner's leadership team. I provide guidance regarding infrastructures and tools that we use at Agile Partner, and technologies, of course. And I make sure that everyone in the company has what they need to work efficiently. As a coach, as an Agile coach, I'm part of a team of more or less 12 people, 12 Agile coaches and Scrum Masters. So we interact a lot. We always work as pairs for a given customer, for example, or even 3 or more people as a team. So when we help customers, we try to help them become more efficient, to deliver faster, and to embrace change, especially lately with the COVID disease. It's been quite a challenge for us and for our customers. We usually run workshops and do meetings, and of course we train a lot of people using games as a metaphor for learning. Then as a software architect and a cloud architect, I I also run workshops like you mentioned EventStorming, which is basically a technique to try to make sense of a complex mess, complex business processes. I also provide guidance on technologies and architectures and help team implement the best technical practices in the most efficient way. And as one of the founders of Play 14, I used to be very involved in the event organization, but now we've decided to let the community take more part in that area and really give it back to the community. But we try to make sure as founders that the philosophy of Play 14 is well understood and that the values are respected. So now I spend a bit more time answering questions and providing some information, making sure that the community stays active and positive. And I'm also in charge of maintaining the website. That's a side story. And yeah, I try also to find better tools to make online events possible and more inclusive and immersive. Because of course we've had some setbacks before. Our events were mostly in person and with a physical gathering, and now it's we've tried to move that remotely, but it's a bit of a challenge.
It is a big challenge indeed, and that sounds like you have so many things going on. It sounds so very exciting, Cédric. And actually, I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I did in our email that your initiative of Play 14 was brought to our attention because of Andrew Lau. He is, I don't know if you remember him.
I do remember him. He's a great guy. I met Andrew last year in Kuala Lumpur when we were doing the first Play 14 event there. Unfortunately, he couldn't play that much because he had to take care of his kids. But I really appreciated the conversation with him, and definitely his approach to games is really interesting.
Absolutely. And talking about approaches to games and playful attitude and using games for many initiatives, we would like to get into a story of a time. Cédric, you've had a lot of experience in software development. You've had a lot of experience with all these workshops and all these things, but I'm sure that there have times where things have been a bit more rocky. You might even call these fails or first attempts in learning. So we would like to know of one of those situations where, again, you were using this playful attitude, you're using games, you're using all these strategies that you have in your toolbox, but things, didn't go as well as you wanted. And of course, what did you learn from that? And or how did you get out of that situation? So we want to be there with you.
Well, to tell the truth, let's take the example of what has happened lately. I really did not believe that playing the kind of games that we do at Play 14 and that we do usually use in the Agile community were applicable with online or remote situations. I was really not convinced that it was worth spending time for that. And I strongly believe that the best learning could only be achieved with co-located players and a facilitator that would be there with them. So I kind of resisted this idea of online games and online Play 14 event. I know that some of the people in the community, they were already going in that direction, but I said, I don't really think it's that relevant. But of course, since the COVID, we had to embrace that fact, and it changed completely everything. So at my work, for example, we have training where we use games. We had to completely rebuild that training to make it remote friendly and to adapt, of course, the games that we would play physically to something else. And at Play 14, we experimented with online events, smaller events at first and then longer ones. And I realized that it could be done to actually provide value with games. The learning objective could be reached, but it works, but it's still a lot of work to make it work properly, to make it very efficient.
No surprise.
Yeah, and I'm still missing a bit of spontaneity and the kind of rush that we have sometimes at Play 14 where we just improvise something because you have a discussion with someone and then you say, okay, let's do this and just try it out and it works and then the result is great. This is much more difficult to achieve in an online fashion. Still, I resisted this for quite some time, and now I see that it's a different approach, but it's still valuable, and it actually opens a lot of doors. Like for the moment, Before, like 6 months ago at Agile Partner, we wouldn't consider coaching online, for example, or training people that were on the other side of the planet. Now it's a possibility. We are actually planning to have a training with a company that we know in Italy. So that's what we can do now because of this effort that we've done, changing things that were really built to be on a physical level to be remote friendly.
Absolutely. And this is a challenge that many, many of us have been facing in different ways, in different fashions. But I'm sure that lesson that it gave you, it brought to you was very, very important and something that you will be using not only right now when, still the COVID is out there and we're trying to stay safe and to reduce the impact that is out there. But I'm sure this is a lesson, and these tools that you have now, these opportunities that have come up, many of them will be still there out in the future, and we will be continuing to make good advantage of them. And talking about opportunities, because I love your story, because it shows how you can change your perceptions with different circumstances, and not everything that happens, even when there are bad things happening, not everything within that has to be bad. So it shows resilience and many other things. And I'd like to shift to another story, Cedric, if that's okay. I'd like to shift to a story where we actually go for a story of success. Again, you were creating, using, implementing a game, a playful attitude for example, for one of these workshops or whatever you want to go for. And, it was a success. It's something that you can be proud of today and say, well, this went great. And this is something that we are still using or that was successful for its time. Would you please tell us one of those stories?
Sure. Well, I can remember, for example, I have many stories about the games that we use at Play 14, of course, but I think I will tell a story about the way we use games at Agile Partner for trainings. Sure. So we have this training called Agile Primer, which gives really the core philosophy of Agile, and we try to focus on the values and principles of Agile. And for that, to illustrate this, because you can say something in many different ways, but it's never as strong as when people actually experience that themselves. That's why we play games. That's why we use games to teach. And
absolutely.
And I was in a Big Four company. I will not say which one, but there are 4 of them. Make your pick. And we were in the training room, and the top partner, the big boss of the office in Luxembourg, was there in the training because that guy actually realized that there was something going on in his company. This wind of change was already blowing, and he wanted to understand what was going on. So he actually had the great idea of spending 2 days with us to follow this training. And in the room, there were different people. So that person who was a top partner in the company, and some other partners and some other managers, and even one person that was a junior that was hired like 2 weeks before. And there were like 18 levels of hierarchy between these people. It's an incredible hierarchy structure in this kind of organization. So. And we were really scared at some point that people would be reluctant to speak up because this big partner was in the room, and that maybe they would not dare say things that they would have expressed otherwise in another context. Maybe if they were just within their team or with people maybe that they worked with on a daily basis. But then we played that game called the ballpoint game, which is our go-to game when we really want to explain a lot or to make people experience a lot of things about Agile and the Agile principles and values. So we played that game, and after 2 minutes of setting up the game, that partner was actually throwing balls at that other person that was hired 2 weeks before, and everybody in the room was actually playing the game and really throwing balls at each other and have laughing and trying to improve the way they played the game. And that is really a story of success for me. That after that game, first we debriefed a lot. We spent a lot of time debriefing the game. And not only they understood, of course, the values of Agile and the principle of Agile, but there was no differences anymore between these two people that were really like 18 levels of apart in the hierarchy. They were on the same level now because they experienced something very strong for, let's say, 20 minutes of game and debrief. they felt the same experience, and all differences were completely leveled out, and then they could really start experimenting or talking to each other on the same level. And I remember that in that same company, another partner came to me at the break and said, I'm a bit scared that people will not talk because I'm there. And I said, don't worry about that. We've been there, we've done that. That game will actually solve all of these issues because it will break all the barriers. It will put people at the same level of understanding first, but also at the same level of experience. And then you just forget about your level in the hierarchy, and you're just here to learn. So that's one experience that we reproduce a lot, like every time we use that game and games in general.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's beautiful how it was able to break that hierarchy. You know, you're at a higher level. I'm a medium level. That there's another one at a lower level, and people can just be there and play games. If they're well designed, if they're well thought through, and they're useful for what you're doing, people are just going to sit there. You know, whether it's around the table, however it is that you design it for, it is capable of working and putting those people and sitting them down together and achieving these amazing things as you were describing. And I loved your story. So thank you very much for such a fantastic story. And you've given us a couple of examples of things that you've done. And I tend to think about, I'm an engineer. I understand you're an engineer as well.
Yep.
We tend to be kind of structured in a way. And sometimes we kind of look for that structure. Do you have some sort of, again, structure, procedure, process, system that you use when you're creating one of these workshops, when you're thinking about teaching one of these things using games and playfulness? How do you approach it? How do you do this?
Well, the starting point is always and should always be the learning objective. What do you want people to get out of the game? What do you want to teach? And if you have that clear in your mind, and sometimes it's not easy to clarify that. So in some cases, there have been quite long discussions at Agile Partner of what is actually the learning objective that we need at that moment of the training, for example, or in that specific workshop that we are designing. What do we want them to learn and to take away? But once this is clarified, then you can find the game that is the most appropriate. So if you already know a game that can fit, then it's perfect, because there are a lot of different games that are already out there. Some of them are actually documented on the Play14 website, but there are also other games that are documented on Tasty Cupcakes, for example, or other websites. And of course, there are so many of them that you know some of them that apply in some situation. But if some don't, if you can't find any that really apply, then you can design one. It's a bit of a challenge, of course, but you can always design a game or an activity, let's say, that will try to reach your learning objective. One of the tools that I use to help was actually designed by people at Play14, and it's called the Debriefing Cube. And it's as the name indicates, it was created by my friends Chris Caswell and Julian Key. So Chris Caswell is from London, and Julian Key is in Berlin, and they really got together and said, there is a lot of people, they propose games, they facilitate games, but they don't really know how to debrief the game, because most of the time it's either very questions that are on the surface that don't really reach very deep, like was it fun or things like that, or they try to push their own assumptions or their own understanding of the game to the people who actually played the game. So they created this tool that's called the Debriefing Cube, with 6 different lenses to debrief a game. And the lenses are the goal of the game, the process of the game, the group dynamics, the communication that was going on during the game, the emotions that people felt, and the takeaways. And this helps us when we design a game, or when we try to figure out if the game will fit for this kind of learning objective. These different lenses can help you figure things out. So that's what we use.
So those are lenses basically to evaluate how the game is doing, if the game is going right. Is that correct?
Well, it can help you to evaluate the game if the game is the best fit according to your learning objective, or if the takeaways, for example, the takeaway lens is what people should have at the end of the debrief. Well, if it fits your learning objective, then you're pretty sure that there's a good match here. It also helps you debrief the game at the end, so you can actually the cube comes with the dice, that you can throw, and a set of cards where you have questions that can be asked. So it can be used in different ways, but you can also just give the cube and the cards to the players, and they will debrief their own game, their own experience. So as a facilitator, you will not be tempted to push your own assumptions, to explain to the players, oh, you should have understood that, you should have felt this, because this is probably the worst thing that you can do as a facilitator. You don't want to explain to people what they should have felt or understood. You want them to realize that by themselves. You want them to reflect on that by themselves. So this tool actually help the facilitator take a step back and let the players debrief their own experience.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement. And Cedric, what would you say is sort of when you're doing this? I'm guessing it could even be the briefing cube right now, but is there some sort of best practice? Anything that you would say that a game-based learning project or a playful project can benefit from? If again a best practice or something that you would say is useful in these kinds of situations.
A best practice, well.
It could be using the cube.
I don't know if, I highly recommend using the cube. It's really helpful. Well, one of the best practices I have is you need to know your games well. You need to be very fluent in the way you set up the game, in the way you explain the rules. Most games have a very simple set of rules, and you should be able to explain them fast, but clearly, so that there is no assumption, there is no misunderstanding about the rules. Otherwise, you risk to have people will not get out of the game what you expect, and unfortunately, it will generate a lot of misunderstanding, and it may become counterproductive in some case. So if you're not confident with your own facilitation of the game, then it's probably a problem for you as a facilitator. And that's also why we created Play 14 at the beginning, that it allows people who are new to game facilitation to really get more experience. Like I have a story about Nancy. I met Nancy. She's from Amsterdam, and the very first Play 14 she was there, she came to a second event that was in Luxembourg, and she played a game that she didn't know on the first day of Play 14. Play 14 usually, when it's a physical event, it takes place over 2.5 days. Like it starts on Friday evening, and then it goes on Saturday and Sunday. And on Saturday, she played a game as a player, as a participant. And on Sunday, she was facilitating that same game to try to become better at facilitating it. And I thought that it was very daring from her to do this as fast as that, because it takes guts to actually really facilitate a game that you just learned the day before. But it's really this mindset of, I want to become better at using that game and facilitating that game. So I jump there in the pool and I just take the risk. And because Play 14 is a safe place, nobody will judge you if you make a mistake or if the game is a bit challenged at some point. And on the other side, they will give you advice. Other people will help you, give you hints or tweaks that you can use, variations of the game, these kind of things. So it's really a good opportunity for a facilitator, even an experienced one, to take a game that they've never facilitated and really train to facilitate that game. So coming back to my original point, I think you need to know your games. You need to be able to explain the rules very efficiently. And of course, you need to have some facilitation tricks up your sleeves. Like when you see that players are not progressing in the game, sometimes they are not getting where they should, then give them some hints, help them a little bit. Sometimes it's also a good thing to trick them on the other side. If you want them to get the full experience out of the game and really have all the takeaways, there are some small tricks that you can use to really make them experience the whole of the game. So that's what you need to do as a facilitator.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that comes with experience, and Play 14 seems to be the right place to get that initial experience, Cedric. And we would like to know, we're going into recommendations now. You recommended your best practice. Is there somebody that you would recommend? Just like Andrew Lau said, I would really like to listen to Cedric in an interview. Is there somebody that you would like to listen to in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Well, at the risk of being insistent, I think the debriefing cube is a very interesting thing. So I think you should talk to Chris Caswell and Julian Key about that. That's because they invented it, so they are better than me to speak about it. And I think it could be an interesting interview.
Absolutely. And continuing with that recommendation spree, is there a book that you would recommend an audience like this one, like The Engagers?
That's a very tough question because I have so many books that I could recommend. So I will say we've played at Play 14 with lateral thinking puzzles. So lateral thinking is really a way of changing the way your brain thinks about solving problems. And there are a lot of books. Lateral thinking was first coined by a guy called Edward de Bono, but there are a lot of books on Amazon. So it could be like more or less mathematical puzzles. Sometimes it's more like a story. Sometimes even stories that you used to tell each other when you were kids. They are considered as lateral thinking puzzles, and it's a lot of fun. So, but there's also another book that is the book from Sharon Bowman's Training from the Back of the Room. It's a great book, and I think every person who does workshops and facilitate games should read that. The Sketchnote Handbook from Mike Roddy is also a great book. And
we're getting a broad recommendation territory here.
Yeah. Recently, I've started to read the Emotional Life of Your Brain from Richard G. Davidson, and it's also a great book because you learn about how your brain and your emotions come, and I've just started it, but it seems to be a quite interesting book.
Absolutely. And what would you say in this world? I know you've probably played quite a few games, especially given all your circumstances and all the things that you do. But what would you say is your favorite game? And again, that could come from your historical game, current game. I don't know, wherever you want to go with that.
Well, regarding the trainings that we do at Agile Partner and Agile trainings in general, and my go-to game is probably the ballpoint game. So it's quite old. I think I can't even remember when it was played for the first time, but I did not invent it. It was invented by someone else. I don't even know the name of that person, but thanks to that person for inventing this game. And this is really our go-to game that we use in most trainings because there's a lot of things that you can explain, that you can debrief from it. And there are many variations that you can play. So that's really one of my favorite games.
Ball pond. How do you spell that?
It's ball point. Like
point.
Ball. Like the goal of the game is really you are one team and you should throw balls from one person to the other in the team with a specific set of rules that is quite simple. And you are only one team, so you compete with yourselves in that game. And it's built with iterations. So you explain the notion of iteration. It's built also with some reflection time at the end to try to improve the process of the game. So it gives us the opportunity to explain what continuous improvement is, the fact that you have 2 minutes iteration and 2 minutes to reflect on how to make your process better is really a great way to explain these notions. And yeah, it's a very interesting game. And I've seen a lot of different variations, as I mentioned. And there are always some nice tricks to learn from other people when you see them facilitate a game. That's also one thing that I love at Play 14 is I stole so many things from other people that it really enriches my toolbox a lot, and that's a great thing.
Absolutely. It sounds very, very exciting. And we've seen that you are sort of a magic wizard of all of these things. And of those things that you're doing constantly, what would you say is that thing, with playfulness and facilitation of games, what would you say is that thing that is sort of your superpower, that thing that you do probably better than most or than maybe even than all other people, that, that's your sweet spot, that's your place?
Well, I think that maybe it doesn't show very much, but I'm a very shy person at first, and really Play 14 helped me a lot to be more confident, and because of that now I'm not scared of trying things out, trying to experiment a lot, and it's now kind of in my daily routine to challenge stuff and to try to figure out how could we do that differently, to see opportunities where other people would see blockers, and playing with variations and with experimentations is
sort of evolving through play or something
exactly.
like that, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have. You mentioned that I love that game that's called Happy Salmon. So it's a very simple game. It's a game that you can buy from any shop. And you have 4 different gestures, and you have a deck of cards that will tell you what gesture you should do, and you need to find another person to do that gesture with. And that game is designed to be played with 6 people at first, and with another person from Play 14. We had several decks, and the first thing that we said is let's scale this game. Let's try to play with more than 6 people at a time, and we managed to play like with 50 something people. And this kind of mindset, like don't be constrained by physical constraint or this kind of because you one thing was built for that usage doesn't mean that you cannot hack this tool or this game or whatever to make something else out of it. So this is probably one thing that I got really good at with Play 14.
Absolutely. That sounds very, very good. So before we get going, I want to make sure that you mention, all the places where we can find, both your day job, Play 14, all the things that you're doing now, where we can find more about you and the work that you do. And if you have any final quick piece of advice, that would be very welcome as well.
Well, it's quite simple. You can find me on LinkedIn, Cédric Pontet. I think on Agile Partner's website, so agilepartner.net. And probably the simplest is to find me on the Play 14 website. So Cedric at play14.org. Play14.org is the website, and that's it. I'm also on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook though. So don't look for me on Facebook. You won't find me.
You will find a fake Cédric Pontet.
Maybe there are other Cédric Pontet, I don't know. But
alter ego. Absolutely. So thank you very much, Cedric, for investing this time in the engagers, giving all that wisdom of all that experience that you got today. But at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over. Engagers, it is fantastic to have you here, and I would like to know, how are you listening to this episode, to this podcast in general? If you're doing it through your mobile in a podcasting app, can I ask you if you have subscribed, if you have rated this podcast? If you haven't, please go ahead and do so. That improves what we call our discoverability in the podcast, so that we can reach more engagers like you to achieve our mission of making learning and life amazing using games and gamification. And if you want the instructions, you just have to go to professorgame.com/iTunes. And of course, do it before you join your next mission. Talk to you in the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.